Okay, still see some people popping in. But I'll go ahead and get started because the first part is more overview. I'm gonna go a little faster since we have a lot of content today. I started the recording already. So just my general overview, like I normally do, is we do have ORD overview training coming up, August 10th and 11th. You sign up through OHDOT Learn, so we're gonna do it through Teams. It's gonna be virtual. So that is coming up here. I like to mention again our wiki page. All the recordings will go to our wiki page. Like this one right now will be up there within a couple days. It'll be up there. Monthly webinars, the rough agenda. Today is going to be on sheet creation annotation. Next month is the open topics one. So I invite you guys to email us with any topics you might want us to show. I think I've gotten one so far. So if you guys have any ideas, can't promise that we can hit every idea, but send us your topics, and the earlier the better, because it does take some time to prepare for these. Mention again, our bi-monthly open sessions are still on hold, so we'll pick those up whenever we get through COVID. Internal Cadd managers meeting, we just had one a couple weeks ago, and then we've got another one scheduled out there. And then our main Cadd user group meetings that are open to you guys and externals. Here's our tentative schedule here. So the next one's called Months Away, and that'll be another live Teams event. Okay, so moving on into the topic here, I wanted to start out with just going over some of the sheet border stuff before we actually get into sheet cells and creation, in case you guys haven't seen the new sheet borders or something like that. So what I have on the screen right now is kind of what we had before. So I kind of just took a shot of like all the different borders on the right edges, and you can see that there was a lot of differences. There's a lot of properties, a lot of repeat properties that were slightly different. We had over 100 sheet cells, like 40 different properties across them all, and I just thought it was getting just a little over the top. We don't need that many things. So when we went to connect, the goal was to see what we can condense down.
See what they're saying. We'll see what they're talking. All right, JD's talking. I'll talk to you later.
If you guys could just mute yourselves. I think I can mute all. There, I just muted everybody, so if you need to ask a question during it, you just have to unmute yourself. So we condensed them down. We kind of modernized the look a little bit. And what we ended up with was we got down to, I think we ended up with 17 different properties instead of 40, and 20 different sheet cells. So definitely condensed them down a lot more. So move on to the next page here. This is just one example of what they look like. So we shifted this area to be larger and took away from the binding area a little bit. So the actual drawing area did not change. That size did not change. So if you guys are worried about that, we kept that the same. We churned some of this. We did this mainly so we could churn some text so they can be more readable by looking at the sheet rather than always having to turn your head. We moved the counting out section over to this side. So you actually now have like the whole sheet edge to fit. Over here, it was very hard to fit all the counting out section. A lot of times you had to go to 2 lines just to fit it. And, then the text sizing got all weird. And so it's over there now. You have, now it can be pretty much as long as you want. We did make the PID on every sheet. We thought that that was important since that's the main identifier for the project, that every sheet should probably say the PID it goes with in case it gets, lost by itself somehow. Another thing we did is we added a prefix to just the page number, which you can't really see, but I think I have zoomed in. So we added a PDOT to the sheet number, and that was really just to make it unique. So now if you do like a text search, quantities from a summary sheet or something like that, you'll actually get that page. And then it also opens up the door for future capabilities, like batch linking. Like you could, if you have a call out with C sheet for details, and it lists a unique number, there's actually things that you can do to automatically create a clickable link there. So we did that just to kind of future proof it a little bit. We did switch this edge border from tag sets to item types. Item types are new to Connect, and they offer more functionality and features. So, main reason why we had tag sets before was so that we had the sheet manager and we could easily manage all the title block data through an application. So we have a new application, and instead of updating tag sets, it's updating item types. So other things to note is that we did move the north arrow off of the border into the plan view. This better supports the software capabilities and plane sheets where you might have different rotations. So we did do that as well. OHDOT sheet, just to kind of make sure everyone's familiar with it, is we have the sheet border here, and that's one cell, and then the inside piece could be another cell, or it could just be blank. So when we refer to like a OHDOT sheet, that could be comprised of a border cell and an interior cell. And we have an application to help place that and place both those cells at the same time. And it kind of shows you everything that we have. So there's a video out there on that. I already mentioned that the sheet border properties are item types now instead of tag sets. Some key benefits here is you can actually drop the border cell now. Before you couldn't drop the border cell or you'd lose all the tag sets. That's not a problem with item types anymore. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. And then the main difference here is the item type is really a property attached to something. So in this case, it's attached to an element on the cell. So you actually can get to all of those different title block data actually through the properties window. So I'm going to show that real quick, and then we'll move on to some sheet creation stuff. So I got a little video that's going to play here. So apparently it's not playing sound. Let me make sure. All right, sorry guys, it wasn't playing sound. Now it should be. types, I do want to highlight some differences between item types and the tag sets that you might have been used to. The first thing to remember is that item types are attached to something. So in the case of our sheet cells, we actually are attaching the item types to the cell itself. So if I click on the sheet cell and go take a look at the properties, what you should see is that the first element in the cell is always going to be the shape, and the shape is the boundary shape. So this outside area, and that's actually was being used to figure out the print area when you go to print. If you guys are wondering how that all is working, it's actually looking at that. But what we have done is that on that first shape, we've attached the item type to that. So if you ever drop your cell into individual elements, the item type will stay to that boundary element. Okay. And so I see on that shape there's items, there's one item type, and here's the name of that item type. When I click on that, I can see all of the sheet border properties. So when I want to update something, I just need to remember to go to the properties and update that property. So if I wanted to change this, so if I zoom in here, we can watch it happen. So this, oh, it already changed. So if I go to, the second I hit enter or click off of it, you'll see it changes. So that's true for all of these. I can just easily change any of these just like that. So unlike tag sets, with tag sets, you actually clicked on the given element. But watch what happens when I do that. So if I click on this text element and I bring up that text editor, you're going to notice that this is a field. So what that means is this field is actually being linked to that property. Okay, so you can't just edit this or you're going to break the link. If I type in something and I go over this, I'm going to remove that link to that property. And then obviously it's going to be a lot harder to manage. So don't do that. If I go a little bit further, I can double click and start looking at what this field is actually pointed to, and I get this field editor, and you can see the property down here that it's actually being tied to. So if for some reason it's no longer linking or the linking isn't working, you could come in here and go, oh, well, I need this to link to this property. So hit OK, fix that link. Another thing you can do is if for some reason the links do get completely like broken, which typically doesn't happen, there's a reassign field. When you click that, you can reassign the field to that element, which then brings up the field editor dialog, and you can dive down to the property you want to link to. And so that's a real quick way. You most likely won't have to do that, but I figured while I was here I'd show you that. The other thing you can do is you can manage your title block data through an application called the Sheet Manager. And the Sheet Manager will let you kind of update all the sheets that it finds inside your work set. So when you first load it up, it's going to actually search your active work set for any sheets. It's going to open those files in the background, and it's going to find all those sheets, and it's going to populate this with the current values of all those title block data across all your sheets in your project. So I loaded up here. You can see this is test, so I have a bunch of stuff of data in here, but I can easily click on any of the sheets it found. I can change the values, hit update values. It's going to update that file. So you don't even have the file open. So this is more single file mode. If you just want to update values on a single file at a time, you can do that. You can switch to export to Excel. And anything you have displayed will export to the Excel file, so you can actually filter down to, oh, I only want to worry about the sheets inside my roadway folder or whatnot. And then you can open that Excel file and you can bulk change everything you want to change. And then when you're done, you can come back, save that file, come back here and do an import, and then import that. And so the import will only update what is displayed. So if you have a filter on, then it's only going to update these files. And when you hit update, it'll ask you for the Excel file. If that sheet isn't listed on the Excel file, then obviously it won't update it. So a little bit of a way to control, what gets updated through these filtering. But there's a whole video on that. If you want to get more information about that, there is a results section that'll tell you if something failed or not. Okay, so that was just real quick. Thought I'd touch on those before we dive into it. So I was got one more slide here, and I'm gonna hand it off to Matt. So I just wanted to give a quick overview of the 3 different types of models that are in a DGN file. We typically have only used 2 out of the 3, but with Connect, the way all the stuff is set up, it's gravitating towards using all 3. So the design we should be pretty used to. That's where you're doing your base mapping stuff. It's the drawing that is kind of new, or we've kind of haven't really used it before. It's been there, we just haven't really used it. So the intent of the drawing is to really be used to kind of set up the sheet file. So your annotation goes in there. It kind of sets up your reference clips of the different views that go into your sheet, like a plan view, or profile view, or cross section. It's setting up that clip area for you. So the intent is to put your annotation in the drawing model as well. And then the sheet model we're all used to, that's what will actually contain your sheet cell. Then that would then reference your drawing model. You would use your sheet cells for printing. Bentley has recommended that the sheets stay paper sized, and it works better with the software. So we have done that, and you'll see that throughout this webinar. That it kind of just works. The software just works better when you leave those sheet cells as paper size rather than scaling it up. So you're going to see that throughout the day. I just wanted to touch on those 3 different types. Drawing is really the new one here for us, at least. With that, I'll hand it over to Matt to kind of go over some sheet creation stuff.
Okay, thank you, sir. I shared my screen. Let me know if you can't see it. So what I'm going to talk about today is 3 workflows to create some plan sheets. And I have 2 methods here for creating an individual sheet, or maybe what you might call a one-off type sheet. So in this demo, I'm going to call it a traditional or a legacy workflow. And it would be similar to any pre-Connect edition products, so any MicroStation V8i version 7 workflows that you might have used, where we just attach all the reference files directly to our sheet model, that is. And then the second would be the Connect edition workflow, or the ORD workflow, using a name boundary. And then the second type of sheet or group would be creating multiple sheets, or even it might be a plan sheet, even if you only had one, using a name boundary workflow in ORD. Is probably going to be the most beneficial way to handle that. So all of these have some advantages and disadvantages, and it's probably going to be subjective depending on who you ask. So what you're going to have to decide is what's going to be best for your project, and that may be different than what your personal preference is, or what you did on the last 10 intersection improvement projects may not be the same as what you need for a highway reconstruction project. So I'm pointing some of these bullet points out just from past experience. It does matter, and depending on the project size, the team and schedule, all those sorts of things have an impact. So you're going to want to consider, the design and production staffing too. So how many people are going to be on the project team? Is it just going to be one person to start? and then maybe 3 or 4 people are going to join down the road once the design gets going. Could that shift during the project? How many externals do you have on the job, and even consultants or sub-consultants working with you? And maybe if you're a consultant later reviewing this, is the client going to be part of the team and working on the project as well? And what about the experience levels of the staffing working on that? Is it going to be some younger staffing working on this with some more experienced staffing? We want the more experienced folks to kind of bring up the younger folks and teach them kind of the right way to do it. Again, not maybe what I shouldn't say the right way, I should say what's best for that particular project, but bring them up and let them know the different ways that things can be done so that they're doing the right things moving forward. And will the same people be on the project, throughout the schedule? Like I was saying, that can change over the life of if you have a really long schedule, especially from the consultant side where I came from, you may start a project, and then when there's a gap in the review period, you get onto another project, and you may not be able to get off of that one to get back to what you had originally started. So you may not see that project again until the end. And then, all these kind of just wrap up into change management, managing your scope and schedule. You may not know those things up front, scope changes, or schedule changes, or even staffing changes. But the point I'm trying to make is consider these things when you are trying to create some plan sheets, or how you're going to create a plan sheet. So don't just go back and use kind of the traditional workflow to create every plan sheet on your project. Because the next person that might help you on your job is most likely going to be used to maybe using some of the newer workflows. So as I said, the one method, or the first method we're going to look at, is creating a traditional type plan sheet. So we'll use a sheet seed file, and this is going to be a DGN file that just has a sheet model in it. And then we'll attach all our references directly to a sheet model at 1:1. And then the border will be scaled for the desired plot scale. So everything here probably sounds really familiar if you've created a plan sheet in the past. And all the reference files and level display will be managed in that sheet model. You will not have any of the ORD drawing production annotation commands like place label or element annotation or the model annotation. So I have a couple of diagrams like this throughout that just kind of show what the sheet or what the DGN file and the type of models that are going to be in there. So here we just see a sheet model on our DGN file, and then on the right just shows some of the possible reference files that you might have attached. So we'll go ahead and take a look here. So we'll start by creating a plan sheet using the traditional or the legacy workflow that I mentioned earlier. So we're going to use a sheet seed file, and we'll have one DGN file that just has a sheet model in it then. And we'll attach all our references directly to the sheet model at a 1:1 ratio. Then we'll place a border in the file, and we'll scale the border up, just like we would in previous workflows. And then all reference display and level display will be managed within the sheet model. So let's go ahead and take a look. So from the OHDOT workflow, we'll go to the apps ribbon, and we'll use the create design files. And in this example, I'm going to create a schematic plan, and I know that my file code is GB, so I'll filter by that. And in my folders, I'm working in this 200 engineering corridors folder, and my PID number has been set, and my next code or field code is going to be in the 001 category. So I'll toggle on the create, and I just want one file, and my file suffix is good at 001. I do want it to be a 200 scale, so I'll change this. And then my sheet seed is set here, so I'm good there. The last thing I'll check is that my open last file is created, or created file is toggled on, and then I'm going to hit create files. Okay, so now our file is created. The model or the sheet box is automatically populated here, but nothing else is in my file. So if we take a look and review our models, we see that we only have a sheet model here. In the pre-Connect edition, the seed files also had a design model in it, which generally wasn't used, and we would just use the sheet model. So if we also look at our properties, then we'll notice that our annotation scale and design scale is set to 200. So now what I can do is attach all of my reference files I'm going to want to use here, and I'll start by attaching the fieldbook file from the survey folder. And then I'm going to go to my engineering, 402 engineering, and go to my roadway base maps. And I'm just going to attach all of the BK and all of the KM files that are here. And then you could attach other files that you might need, drainage, structures, whatever else the case might be. This is all I'm going to do for now. And then I want these all to be attached at Coincident World. And I want to make sure that my detail scale is set to either 200 or that this scale here, my master and reference scale, is set to 1:1. Right now, it's not going to come in at the correct location. It'll be scaled to a 20 scale sheet. I can also check here, I don't really want any live nesting to be used, so live nesting is toggled on, however the nest depth is set to 0, so essentially it's going to end up toggling it off. I usually just prefer just to make sure and just say no nesting. So I'll make this change here for all of these. Last one. So then I can just go back and review these real quick to make sure that my scale is 1:1 or rotation and offset is all set to 0 here. And I think I missed one, so let's just type. Yeah, so BK003, if I fit my view here, we'll see that the majority of my reference files came in here, and BK003 came in all the way down here. And then in this bottom left corner, that's the sheet outline that was placed in from the seed file. So I'll fix my BK003. Hopefully you can see that on the screen. So there we go. So now we're lined back up. And now we'll just zoom into our project area. And we can start to create our sheet. So I'll close my reference files, close my models. I'm going to go back to the OHDOT workflow into the apps, and I'm going to use the OHDOT sheet cells application here. I'm going to use this to replace my border on this sheet, and I'm going to go filter this by generic sheets, and I want a schematic plan. I'm going to double click on this, and when I do, the place active border dialog will populate with the correct item type fields that we can populate. So I'll start by changing my scale to 200. And my rotation, I'm going to leave it use active angle. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the active angle the 2 points command. I'm just going to key that in so that I'm not changing or not canceling out this command at this point. And I'll just go to data point, the north end of my project and the south end of my project to get an approximate rotation of angle of 288. So then I'm going to, before I data point and place that, I can populate these fields so that my title block is populated. And let's say I know that this is sheet 2. I don't know my total yet, so I'll leave that blank. And I'm going to be the designer. JD will be my reviewer. I'm not sure when he's going to review that yet, so I'll leave that blank as well. And then for my scale bar, my first field will be 100. And then my second will be 200. And third will be a 400. And then lastly will be my county route section. and it's going to be dark 185, and I don't remember the SLM, so 000. Now I can come in and position my cell where I like it, and then I'll just data point to accept it. Now I chose to use the active angle option here. You could have also gone ahead and rotated the sheet, or rotated your view, and then placed the sheet per that view rotation. I did choose this way. There was a reason, and that is because when I create a sheet, I'll usually place my border, and then the next thing I'm going to do is place my north arrow. If I don't do it now, I'll usually forget and have to come back and add it later. So if I add in, or if I just use the AC for active cell key in equals N arrow, I'm going to use a key in here just so I don't have to go find the cells dialog from the other menus. When I do that, my active angle is populated from what I just set, so I can set that back to 0 in the dialog, or I can use AA equals 0 in my key in window. And I also want to change my scale for both my X and Y to 1. I could also do that in the key in if you wanted to do it that way with AS equals 1. So now in my view, I can just go ahead and data point wherever I want to place this, and I can see that my north arrow is pointing straight up, which is correct. So the last thing we can do then is rotate our view. And then we can fit the view, and we have our sheet created. So from here, I might just save settings just in case I wanted to close this for the day, come back tomorrow and keep working, or maybe for some reason something crashes. You never know how that's going to work out. So moving on, we'll just go ahead and let's say we want to go ahead and toggle on some levels, change some of the level display here. We could turn on and off references using the reference display dialog here. So we could just turn off any of these that we may not want to see. Or we can just turn off the levels that we may or may not want to see. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to start with the topo file. And I think just for the schematic plan, I don't really want to see any of the vegetation or the utilities. And I can probably get away with turning off all the survey information there. So that looks good. And then I'm going to go to my three existing alignment files, and I'm going to toggle on the 500 stationing so that I have a station tick or label every 500 feet rather than. Okay, so the 500 station should only show a. Oh, it's because I haven't finished turning off my levels yet. So I'm going to turn off the station so that my stationing only shows every 500 feet, or I show a label every 500 feet. So now if I look at my proposed alignments, I'm going to do the same thing. And this is where I confuse myself. We'll see on the existing, now that I have all the proposed turned off here, the existing shows a station label every 500 feet with a tick every 100. So for my proposed, so then I'll also turn on my 500 stations. So, okay. So now I can also turn on my curve data, and you'll see that this is kind of a mess here, and probably should have turned on my curve data for my existing as well. And now we get all this stuff overlapped. This is because this is all referenced in from our base map. So you have a choice here. We could copy these in to our sheet and display them here, or you could go into your base maps and move these around and clean them up. A lot of times what I had done in the past was in my base map file, I would have gone and moved these off away from the project area a little bit, and then maybe attach that again as a second reference file. And then I could move and even clip it as I might need to. Maybe I needed to show some of the curve data down here, some over here because of other nodes or other things going on my sheet. So then for my corridor files, I'll select all three of those, and I'm going to turn off all of these corridor modeling boundaries and display areas, and then I'll also turn off maybe these do not construct and these match line things, and I'll also turn off probably my ditches. So I've cleaned up my plan view. I can come back. I can probably turn off my ditch or the fence line a little bit, So, but in general, I have this looking like I would want it to look like. So again, I'll fit my view and then I'll save my settings. And then the last thing we can do, we can go back and maybe we come back in a couple of days or a couple of weeks and we want to revisit the title block annotation. I can come back and use the OHDOT Sheet Manager app. And this will search for any sheet files that exist in the sheet folders. It does take a second to load. So I currently only have this one plan sheet that I've created here, so I'm only going to be able to edit in the single mode. But you could also export to Excel and import from Excel. So if you had a whole bunch of sheets and you want to do a batch edit of maybe a sheet number or PID number changed or something like that, you could export that data to Excel, make your edits, and then import it back in. So I'm going to select my schematic plan here, and I know that JD went ahead and reviewed this. So I can enter in my date, and maybe I know that my total sheet number is now 150. So when I hit update values, then we'll see that those fields are automatically updated for us. Okay, so now the last thing I want to touch, I'm not sure what's going on here, but the last thing I want to touch, and I think that's where I was going, is some of our annotation is not going to work in this case. So if we go to the drawing production workflow, and if I use either a place note, and I want to set, let's say maybe one of my text favorites to a station, and when I data point here, it's not going to give me the annotation here. And then if I use place label and maybe do the same thing, and maybe I want a full station offset, we'll see that the place label command down here says invalid for sheet and profile models. So that's not going to work here. We need to do those annotations in a drawing model, which we don't have here, or in a design model, again, which we don't have here. Lastly, the same thing if we were to want to annotate, if we wanted to maybe turn off the stationing from all the reference files and just annotate it right in our sheet, we can't do that here either. So we're unable to run this in a sheet. And I believe that should say profile model instead of drawing model. So, I mean, one thing you could do is add a drawing model here. And I'm not going to go over that workflow, but if you wanted to do that, we would have to manually add it from the models dialog here. We did have a consultant try to do this, and actually it was on a schematic plan. And there was a bug, and we filed a defect with it. Even though you add the drawing model, the annotations still do not work in the drawing model because it wasn't there when it was created. So that's been filed. I'm not sure when that'll be fixed, but that could be a potential workflow adjustment you could make. But in the same token, if you wanted to do that, you would probably just want to go ahead and use the name boundary workflow, which I'll show next. Okay, so I apologize for a little bit of overlap there with the sheet manager, but kind of I showed a little differently than what JD had done, just editing the sheet as it was created. And I'm not sure what I was thinking when I created used the place note command with the text favorite. That's probably not going to work regardless of where you're at. But we can talk about that another day. So this next diagram sort of shows what I was explaining there at the end, where you could add a drawing model if you wanted, and then attach your references to the drawing model, then to the sheet model. And essentially what you would end up creating is basically the name boundary type workflow. You could also replace or add another diagram here and replace the drawing model with the design model and do the same thing. And again, you might as well, if you're going to go to that effort, you might as well use a name boundary workflow. And that's what we'll talk about here. We're going to create the same sheet in this example that we show in a minute with the name boundary workflow. And to create the sheet, we'll use a design seed rather than a sheet seed. And it's going to end up being all contained in one DGN file with a design, drawing, and a sheet model. But the drawing and the sheet models won't exist until we actually use the name boundary process to create those. So we'll attach all our references right to the design model at 1-to-1, and then the design model is going to be used for our name boundary placement, and will also sort of act as our container file. The design model is then attached to the drawing model, and it's going to use live nesting. And then the drawing model is then attached to the sheet model with live nesting also. So sort of like the diagram that JD had showed a little bit ago, kind of that's the flow chart to how that would work. And our reference display and level display will be primarily managed within the design model, since that's going to be our container file. And it will also, you can also have some control in our drawing and sheet models. In general, though, I would recommend keeping that within the design model. And then most of our annotation is going to be placed in the drawing model. And as JD was talking about earlier, the sheet model has a border at 1-to-1, and it's placed at XY of 0-0. So it's sort of, if you have an AutoCAD background, it sort of emulates some of that, the workflows there. And then our drawing model is then scaled and rotated to fit within that 1-to-1 border. So it's sort of the opposite of the traditional workflow where we scale the border up to fit the sheet. And then lastly, kind of my thought here is the sheet model is really just a way or a view to plot from. So not a whole lot going to happen in that sheet model view. You can add some notes and annotation if you need, but generally most of your work is going to be in your drawing model. So let's take a look here. So here's our diagram of what our DGN file is going to look like. Again, we're going to have 3 models in it when it's complete. We're going to start with just a drawing or a design model, and we'll attach all our references to it. And then that design model, when we do the name boundary process, we'll create the drawing model, and then it will also create the sheet model, and then those will be referenced to each other. Okay, now we're going to take a look at recreating the schematic plan that we just created with that traditional workflow, and we're going to reproduce that using a name boundary workflow. Before we move on, it's worth pointing out that if I snap to the lower left corner of this sheet boundary or sheet cut line, you'll notice that the coordinates kind of match the project coordinates here. With the name boundary workflow, our sheet border, that corner there, is going to be placed at 0-0. And then the way the name boundary process works is going to create a drawing model, and that'll end up being attached and scaled and rotated to fit that 1-to-1 border. So it's a little bit different thinking than most of us are used to, but some of the benefits there are pretty useful. So we'll start this by creating a new sheet, and we're going to use a design seed. And when we open that drawing up, all we're going to have is a design model within it. And we'll attach all of our references directly to that at 1-to-1. And that design model is going to be used, where we're going to place our name boundaries, and it's also going to sort of serve as what we're going to call our container file. Then the name boundary process will create the drawing and sheet models and place them in the same DGN file. And most of our view display will be handled within that design model and will be carried through with live nesting into the other models. So let's just jump in and we'll go to the OHDOT workflow. We'll use create design files. And I do want to, I want to create 2 files here. And at the end of this, I'm going to show maybe a second way to use a name boundary. So what I'm going to do is filter this to, there we go, roadway. And I just want sheets. So I'm going to create a schematic plan first, and it's going to just create 002. That's my next one. And I want to create this at 200 scale again. But here, what I want to do is, because I'm going to use the name boundary process, I'm going to create it in a design seed. I also want to, a second part of this example will be to create maybe an intersection detail. So I'm going to create that, and I'll create that at maybe 30 scale. And I want to do that as well in the design seed. And then I'll toggle off create last because I actually want to open the schematic plan. So we'll come back to the GI detail at the end here. Okay, so my files are created, and I'm just going to do an open. And there's my second schematic plan. I'll open it. Okay, now that my file's open, just same as what I did earlier, I just want to review the models and notice that there's only one design model here. And that's fine. The name boundary workflow will create the drawing model and sheet model for us. So what we'll do now is the same process as we did earlier. We will attach the reference files that we need, and I'm just going to attach the exact same files I used previously, being the fieldbook file from the survey and from the 402 engineering. I'll go to roadway and base navs, and I'll attach all of my BK and KM files. And again, my detail scale here should be good, and my scale ratio should be good. I also, again, want to make sure that I'm not using any live nesting, so should be good just to okay through the rest of these. And again, I just like to take a quick look. Everything looks good. So I can fit my view here. And before I go too far, here's what I want to do. I'm going to turn off the existing alignments, and maybe I'll just also turn off the corridor model files for now, as well as let's just turn off their fieldbook file. So we have just basically just our proposed alignments here. And I'm doing that so that we can sort of show how this container file will handle this later. And then again, I just want to save my settings real fast. So now I'm going to go to drawing production, to name boundary, and I want to set the civil plan at plan only, and detail scale is 200. And I'll leave my name as plan 1, and then I'll go ahead and identify my path. And before I do that, I'll toggle these off. So I'm going to start this. We could lock that to the end. We could data point, or we could key it in. So I'm just going to key or data point here at the beginning of the project. And I don't want to lock it in the end. I could have locked it in the beginning. And we'll notice we get some weird shapes here, you know, not what you might expect, but it's just because of the geometry that's going on here. And I really only wanted one plan sheet. I could adjust the boundary if I wanted to. So I'm just going to data point inside of this anywhere, and it's going to set my end value there, whatever my sheet length would be, 5,000 feet. Okay, so then I'm going to data point to accept this, and we'll notice that I have this create drawing toggle on, so it's immediately we'll go ahead and create this for us. And now also the show dialog was toggled on, so now we get this dialog here. which will allow us to make sure we set these scales appropriately. So we'll change our, it's worth taking a look here that this is broken into different sections. So this middle portion is going to be for the drawing model settings, and then the bottom or lower portion here is going to be for our sheet model. So for our drawing model, we want to change our scale to 1 inch equals 200, or 1 foot equals 200. Yeah, 1 inch. And in our sheet, our annotation scale is going to stay 1 to 1, but our detail scale then is going to be 200. And then the seed models for each one of these are going to be the planned DGN library, and it's going to use the appropriate model from that DGN library. So we'll hit OK, and I have the open model toggle on, so it will go ahead and open the sheet model when it's done. Okay, so there we go. We have a very similar sheet to what we created before. We could modify this name boundary a little bit if we wanted to extend or reclip this. I'm not going to worry about that for now. If we look at or review the models that were created, we now have a design model, which is where we started. A drawing model was created, and our plan, or our sheet model is now this plan 1 sheet, which is the active model we have open. So if we go back and review the drawing model, nothing appears here. So what I'm going to do is, this is a little bit of a bug, and I think it even goes back to V8. In my key-in window, I'm just going to key in RD equals, which is a retrieve design, and basically it's just going to close this file and reopen it right back up again. Okay, so now it's reopened it back in the the design model again. That's because that's where I saved my settings. Now, if I look at my drawing model, we'll see that the reference files are attached. So if we look at the reference files, that will be the design model of this particular file. And it is attached with live nesting. So that means any changes we make to the design model, as far as level display or reference display, will be carried through by use of the live nesting. And the override is set to never. There may be some scenarios where you have to set that to allow or always to maybe override one particular sheet versus the rest. Okay, so now if we look back at our sheet model, we'll see everything looks the same as what it did before. And when we look at the reference file now, that is actually referencing the drawing model. All right, so in our drawing model contains the north arrow that was annotated with the name boundary process. So now let's say I want to go back and turn on some things so that we can see them. And I'll go back to my design model, and then I can turn on I'll just turn everything back on. And then I'll go to my level display, and I'm going to make the same changes that I made in the earlier sheet. And I'm going to do all the alignments kind of here at once. So I'll do an existing alignment, proposed alignment, do 500 curve data, stationing for both existing and proposed. And then in my corridor models, I'm going to turn off these same sort of things I turned off earlier. Okay, so now it kind of looks more like our schematic plan. Again, I'll save settings here, and then I should be able to swap over to my sheet model and see. Let's go to the drawing model first. So those changes were reflected in our drawing model, and now if I go to my plan or my sheet model, the same changes were reflected all the way through. Now, as far as annotation and things go, you're going to want to do most of your annotating in your drawing model. And I'll just use kind of the similar examples we used before. If I place a note, okay, I'm not sure what's going on there, but if I place a label and I use a plan station offset, it will allow me this time now saying identify the element, or I'm going to identify my center line, and then I'll pick my start station. So there it's labeled the point that I just data pointed there. If I wanted to label the corner of this building, I could snap to it and get that there. So yeah, there's some advantages here to the annotation. We could also come back in, and as I was saying earlier, if you wanted to maybe annotate the stationing and curve data in your drawing model, you could. So if we go back to our design model and look at the level display for these, we'll turn off stationing and curve data and then go back to our drawing model. Those changes are reflected, and we can annotate our element. I'll select my center line. Okay, so now my annotation is placed here, and I want to control my levels here a little bit. I don't want to see everything that's going on. I don't need to see all the different levels that we have for the stationing. So let's see. There we go. I can turn all of these off and only show my 500 that I want to use anyway. And then I can move this curve data around or wherever I want to put it. And then if I go to my sheet model, you'll see that the curve data that I moved is down here, but this is going to be a little confusing until you get used to using it once. You'll see that there still is the same curve data here on the plan view. And that's because the drawing model itself, the live nesting, has no real impact on it because it's a direct reference to the sheet. So we can kind of look at that better as if I turn live nesting off from my drawing model, you'll see that all of the plan information goes away. So everything from my design model goes away, but any of this annotation that exists in my drawing model is still here. So now if I look at my level display for my drawing model, you'll notice these are still on. So regardless of what changes I made for that in the drawing model, I still need to come in and make the same change here. So I can turn those off and clean those up. And then I can turn my live nesting back on. And I still am getting some reference levels here. So let me do the RD equals again and see if that helps clear up. Yeah. So if you are having issues, you make a change right away and you're not seeing it be reflected all the way through, you can either close the file completely or get back in. Before you do that, you want to make sure you save settings so it does actually remember the change you made. It's just a view thing, and you just need to close it or reopen it, or the RD equals is a nice little trick. It just kind of does it for you. Okay. So the rest of the sheet is, as far as annotating the border and all those things that we talked about earlier, is all the same process. It's just, that's the name boundary workflow is probably going to be what you would recommend 9 times out of 10. So earlier in this demo, what I did is I also created a GI sheet, so for an intersection detail. So let me go open that. I want to show a slightly different process that could be useful for you, just to create an individual sheet of maybe an intersection detail or some other kind of detail that you might need of just a particular area. Again, when we created this, we only used the design seed, so we only have a design model. And same process here. Okay, so for the sake of time, I'm not going to do all the exact same files I did earlier. Actually, I'm just going to exclude the field book and 200 engineering, and we'll go to roadway, and I'll just do the BK and the KM files here. Okay, so maybe in this case, I want to create an intersection detail here. I could use that name boundary workflow, and I could tell it I want to start here and stop here. Or what I could do is going to use this civil plan by element toggle. And what that's going to do is going to take the shape that I have drawn in my model here and use that as my name boundary. So I'm going to go key in, just place shape. Basically pick a create a closed shape there, and maybe I want to move it a little bit. Okay, so now we'll go back to the name boundary, and we'll use that toggle civil by plan. And it is going to ask me to identify the center line just as a reference element. So I'll identify that. And then I want to identify the shape, and I'll data point to accept it. So I'm given the same dialog I was given earlier, and same thing. In this case, I said I wanted to create a 30 scale plan, and I'll make my detail scale 30. Okay, so we'll see now I have a drawing model and a sheet model, just like I had in my previous sheet. And really what I wanted to point out here was the usefulness of being able to easily scale the drawing model. So here, like I said, I wanted a 30 scale plan, but what if I wanted to make that 20? I realized that I probably should make that a little bit bigger. So I can make that a 20 scale here. Let's scale it up. Now maybe I want to move it around in my sheet. I can do that. I could also come in and reclip this a little bit better if I wanted to only maybe not show so far back on the side road next sort of thing. So that could be a sort of a second way to create an individual sheet with a name boundary workflow. Okay, so hopefully that's all clear as mud and everyone's still with us. So next we're going to take a look at creating multiple sheets using the name boundary workflow. Again, we'll start with a design seed, and really the workflow is the exact same as creating an individual sheet. I just wanted to point out that there's kind of 2 other options here that we could do. We could create all the models in one DGN file. So our design model would then be used for name boundaries and a container file, and all of the sheet and all of the design models that are then created are going to be in that same DGN file. And then the second way would be one sheet per DGN. So I think that's traditionally what what most of us have done in the past. I think V8i allowed you to do that, but just for simplicity, we kept it all as one sheet per DGN. So in this case, what we're going to recommend is we're going to use a file code of GP000 as a DGN by itself, which will act as our container file and our name boundary, or where our name boundaries will be placed. So then when we create each DGN for the sheets, those will each only have a design, or excuse me, a drawing and a sheet model. So if we take a look at the first one, this would be all models in a single DGN file. So you'll see one design model, and you have multiple drawing and multiple sheet models. So the design model again is where all our reference files would be attached to, and then those then are the design model is then attached to the drawing model, and drawing model is attached to the sheet. And then in the one sheet model, per DGN, we're looking at separating this out. So we see a container file DGN, which only has the design model, as I mentioned, and then the sheet models again only have the drawing and sheet model, or the sheet DGNs only have the drawing and sheet models. So, all right, so let's take a look. For the final plan sheet demo, we're going to take a look at creating multiple sheets using the name boundary workflow. The process is really the same as what we just did to create the second schematic sheet example, where we're going to create a seed file or create a new drawing using a design seed, and we're going to attach all our references to that design seed and place our name boundaries in there. As you saw on the previous slide, there are two options there where we can create all the plan sheets within one DGN file, and we'll just have a whole bunch of different models in there, or we can create one sheet per DGN file. And that usually has been the recommendation and what I see most people do on an OHDOT project, but there might be some exceptions. So in any event, that's what we're going to show, and we're going to show this process using a container file. So this way our container file is separate from any of the sheet DGN files, and it sort of controls things independently from the rest of them. So to do that, we'll start by using the OHDOT create design files app, and I will create a GP file, and I'm going to toggle that on to be created. And notice that the suffix is set to 001, and we're going to use it's using a sheet seed as it sits at the moment. But I want to create this as a container file, so we're going to use the 000 suffix. And when I change that, it changes to a design seed. So it'll also change to the design seed if you use 100, 200, 300, etc. So we're going to carry on with that, and my open last is toggled on, and I will create this file. Okay, now that file is open, we're going to go back and follow the same process we did before. Let's first take a look at our models. We only have the one design model here, which is what we want. And now we'll go ahead and attach the files we want, our reference files that we want to show up on our sheets. So again, we'll use the field book file from survey. And I want the base maps from the engineering corridors. Okay, so now we can fit our view. Everything looks like it was looking before. And just because I'm in here, I'm going to go ahead and toggle off some of the same things I did before. Actually, I want most of these things on. So I'm going to turn off some survey, scratch levels, and maybe I'll turn off the, probably don't need any of the tin stuff, the DTM levels. And one thing I want to turn off is maybe the center of the pavement. And then I'll save my settings here. So now we'll go to the drawing production workflow, and we'll go to the name boundaries. And we'll go back to civil plan. And before I start, what I want to do is make sure I toggle off grade drawing. Because I'm going to do a plan and a profile here, I do not want to have it create the drawing for me, because the second step, the first step is going to be creating the name boundary for the plan. And then the second step will be creating the name boundary for the profile. So while I'm talking about it, what I'm going to do is right click and hold and use this view control toggle to turn on a plan and a profile view. Okay, so we do have a little issue with the level display. This has been a bug. We've reported to Bentley several times, so we just got to turn that level display on. And now we can go back to our plan view. So, all right, so now we'll go back to the name boundary command. We're in civil plan. We're going to select a drawing seed. We want to select plan and profile, but we want the plan only version of it. And we'll select our scale, which is going to be 20. And I'm going to leave it as plan 1. And then it's asking me to also identify the path. So I'm going to identify the center line here. So now the name, hold on, back up a second. I'm going to create a new group, and the name, since now I've identified the center line, the name is taken on the name of the center line chain. So I can pick my begin and end just by data pointing, or I can type in the location, or I can use the toggles to lock it to the beginning and end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock this to the beginning to start here. But for the ending, I don't want to go the whole length of this chain. So I'm just going to go to station 431. So now I'll data point through here to accept all these, and you'll see that the boundaries are created in my design model here. So data point and 2 more times to finish that, and you'll see that those are now placed in my drawing. So now what I want to do is switch to my profile view and create a name boundary here. So I'm going to toggle my civil profile on. I'm going to set my drawing seed to plan profile, and this is going to select the profile version or the profile seed. Again, I'll change my scale to 1 to 20, and I'll leave my profile name the same. And what I want here is I want to create this from the plan group. So it's reading the group that we just created, which was CLP S185. And we're going to create a new profile group here. So it's going to create it from the CLP 185 symbol. So now I'll toggle on the create drawing here in the show dialog, and that'll bring up the last step to actually create the sheets. So the prompts are now telling me to identify profile view. So I'll just select in my view, and it'll bring in the boundaries, or creates the boundaries at the same station limits as what we already created for the plan view. So data point, accept it, and now I have my create drawing dialog. So it looks the same as creating a single plan, but now we have our profile options on the right. So in our drawing model, our scale is set to 1 to 20, and our detail scale is set to 1 to 20. Everything else looks good here. And as well as with our drawing model, our scale is 1 to 20, and our detail scale is 1 to 20. So I really don't need to make any changes here. I can just hit OK. Oh, excuse me, I do need to make one change. So in this example, what we're going to create is one sheet per DDN file. So we'll toggle that on, and it will populate the roadway sheets folder here, or I could change that if I needed to place it somewhere else. So when we created the container file, that is also placed in the roadway sheets folder. And we can give it a name. So since I want each sheet to have match the ODOT naming convention, so it'll be the PID number underscore the drawing code, which is GP, and I'm going to give it a number of 1 here. And you'll have to do a little bit of file renaming within ProjectWise to add in the 001. It just depends on how many sheets you have. You might be able to add a 01 or 001. Just depends on the number of sheets that you're going to create. So I'm going to leave it as that for now, and then I'm going to hit OK. So this will go through and create the sheets. And if I switch over to ProjectWise, we automatically see that GP1 is created. GP2 is being created now. And this will go ahead and populate the rest of those as if they're created. So it's a rather quick process to create whatever there's going to be here, 9 or 10 sheets. Okay, so it's finished creating all the plan sheets. For the time being, I'm going to just go close to these check-in prompts. And it's opening the last sheet that it created. There's probably not going to be much to see here. But we have a plan view and a profile view for existing ground. So what I'll do is I'll just switch to my first plan sheet. Okay, so there you have, we have a plan sheet, our plan and profile sheet with our plan view and our profile view. And if we look at the models that were created, we now have a sheet model, which is what we're looking at right now. And we have a plan drawing model. So that has our plan view in it, and then our drawing model for our profile. So if we double click on those, we can switch. And again, as we mentioned in the previous examples, this is where you're going to want to do most of your annotation. And if we look at our profile, here we have all of our profile, and it's all annotated here. Going back to the drawing model, one of the features that was added in one of the newest releases of ORD was that match lines are now annotated here. So these are placed in our drawing model, as well as our north arrow is now placed in the drawing model. And when we look back at our sheets, I think we mentioned this in some of the previous webinars, and we've removed the north arrow area from the title block, so that'll just be placed in your plan view. And if you had a plan, a second north arrow would also be placed for the second plan view. And you would probably just keep that in the same sort of upper right area of that view as well. So that's the same workflow, or pretty much the same workflow, except that we create a container file first and then use it to create our name boundaries and then create the sheets from there. All of the annotation and things, like as I said, would be placed in the drawing model. You might maybe have some random notes or something you might add in your sheet, and that's fine too. But this is probably the recommended workflow for 9 out of 10 types of drawings that you're going to want to create. As I've mentioned, this workflow behaves the same as what we previously looked at with the container file or the design model controlling the level display and reference display. So let's just take a quick look at what that looks like. I'm going to go into the container file and I'm going to turn off the trees here and some of these corridor elements that I don't need to see in my plan. So if I want to zoom into that same area, my plan sheet there, I can, and I said I was going to turn off the trees and as well as the corridor elements. And so then I will save my settings here. And it's simple as going right back to the same file that we just had opened. And there you have the trees are turned off as well as the the corridor template drop display elements that were shown there. And this will save you a lot of time when you want to turn things on or off in each, for every plan and profile sheet on your project. You only have to do that in the container file, and you don't have to go to each sheet and do the same thing over and over again. So just to wrap this up, I'm going to close this session of MicroStation or ORD here. And I'm going to go back to my project-wise session. And I'm going to look at my local document organizer. And when I created all these, I went ahead and hit close on the check-in prompt. And it was just to save a couple minutes there. So I'm going to select all of these files I have checked out, and I'll right-click and check them all in. Okay, so now I had mentioned that we need to come back in and modify these, so we can rename these by using the rename command, right-clicking and going to rename. I could also just go to the properties at the very bottom here. As a trick, I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but if you hit space bar, that'll bring up the properties dialog, and I can rename my file here. I'm going to do it here because what I can do is hit save, and then I can hit the next button, and it'll take me to the next file. So I'm going to make this 10, and then I'll just finish renaming all these. There are some other ways we can do this in a batch process using modify, using the modify command. But if you're only doing maybe 10, it's probably just as easy just to rename them individually. So there we have all of our container file and our 10 plan and profile sheets that we just created.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm still on mute. That's all I have. JD, I don't know if we want to pause here for any questions or just move on to Eric. But I wanted to also add a link to the training guides that are on the wiki page, and I forgot to do that. So, but those are good resources that describes all that process and maybe even a few more steps in a little more detail. But, so.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, you know, I see I answered the one in there from Ian. I'm actually gonna add a couple more things, like a couple more slides, and then we'll hand it over to Eric. And he'll go over more annotation stuff. But hopefully you guys saw all the different things there. That name boundary tool, you know, there's other modes in there as well. He showed creating it from an existing element. You can also, there's another mode where you can just click your points to get your area and create a quick like intersection detail as well. So it doesn't hurt to look at those. You might find it faster than referencing, rotating, clipping, placing a sheet cell that manual way. You know, they both have pros and cons, so we showed both of them there. But keep that in mind when you go to cut your next sheet. You know, there are these other ways of doing it. All right, so I wanted to quickly just add a couple more things on what you can do with sheet creation. One of them is 3D cut. So I got a quick video here. I know we're running kind of long. I've still got a good amount of stuff from Eric, some good stuff that he's going to show. And hold on, let's see, let me reshare my screen. Touch on some more things that you can do when you're generating your plan profile sheets. Is how to display crossing features. So if you have something crossing the road, maybe it's a utility, drainage, a culvert, something, you typically want to show that on your profile view. So Matt just showed how to cut plan profile sheets, and you can see I have that same GP000 file up here that I used to set all those up. And so I'm going to show how you can show these crossing features that you might have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a reference here. So let me just come over here. I'm going to add a reference to a drainage file that I put in here. Okay, so I just threw something in here just to show. So I got this pipe going through the road. So what I want to do is come down to my profile view here. There's a little button right here, and it says Create 3D Cut. So I click that. I have two different methods. I can do placement method by corners, or the full profile, which would basically be make a cut of the full profile. So I'm going to do by corners. So I'm going to click to accept that method, and then now I can select my start point. So I know that my drainage stuff is only on the second sheet. So I'll just click to kind of add a point here and a point here. And what that's going to do is it's going to kind of slice through the model, the 3D model at this location, and it's going to display all that 3D stuff. So if I zoom in here, you can start seeing I got my pavement build up. There's that drainage pipe that's crossing. So that's how you can get your 3D crossings features to show up. But now you can easily come here and change the size of this if you don't like that size. You can add another one. So if I click this, I can even add another one over here. For some reason, maybe you have a different area that you want to show. and you can create another one. And you can easily click on these and delete those as well. And then as well, to control level display in here, it's just a little bit different. So the way it works is in this 3D cut, maybe I really don't want to show these pavement layers, right? So in this view, I'm going to go and I'm going to turn off those. I think those ones right there. I'm going to turn off those levels. Now, in order to get that to apply to this view, after you do that, you do have to come up here and hit this refresh 3D cut button. So if I hit that, now those levels has turned off. Also, it's important to note that this level display with the 3D refresh button only works in 2020 release 2 of the software. So I turned off those 3D kind of shapes for the pavement buildup, but you can see there's the pipe still there. So you have to be conscious of this 3D cut, the refresh button, because it's when you place this 3D cut, it's static. So it's like at that point in time. So if you go and make a change, that change is not going to show up until you refresh this cut. So that also goes with, say, maybe you change the elevation of this pipe down. You go to that drainage file, change the elevation. When you come back here, the pipe's still going to show up right here. You have to come back and hit this refresh to get that to then move down. So I'm going to add another attachment now. And I'm going to add an attachment to my utility file. So that utility file just so happens to have a gas line coming through the road. So after I add that reference, you'll notice that it doesn't show up in the 3D cut on your profile. And even if you hit a refresh, it also doesn't show up. So I'm going to contact Bentley, get a service request in with them. I think that should still work. But the workaround for now is you'll just have to replace this name boundary, or not name boundary, sorry. You replace this 3D cut, and then it'll have knowledge of that new reference. There you can see there's the gas line. So just a little oddity that will most likely be fixed in a later release. So that was adding it. Let's go check out our sheet and make sure it does show up. So I'm going to switch files over to that GP file, the O2, because this is the second sheet. I'm going to check in this so it gets that 3D cut from the profile that we added and those new references. Okay, so it's loaded. I'm actually on sheet 2. If I zoom in, you can see that it is already showing up there. The yellow one's just not so easily seen on a white background. It will also show up in the drawing model as well. That's where this sheet's coming from. There you see that. And you're going to see this information. It says outdated information might be displayed. That's because it knows that there's a 3D cut, which it knows it needs to be refreshed. So it's giving you a warning and saying, hey, it might be out of date. So that's where you have to go back and do that refresh. But that message is always going to show up even if it's up to date. That's why it says might. It's just kind of like a reminder warning every time you get into a model that has something displaying from a 3D cut. So that's all I really wanted to show. And then another thing I wanted to show was with the, if you have profiles in different, if you draw on your profile from different files, how you can get those to show up. Another thing that I wanted to show was some ways to draw on profile views and how to kind of get them to show up on across different files. So a good example of this is maybe bridge stuff. So I'm in a bridge base map. I referenced in my roadway alignment here. I got my profile up. Let's just assume we got a bridge somewhere just for purposes of demo. But maybe on my profile, I want to start drawing in some things dealing with my bridge. So if I go and just start drawing something, it can just be regular mic station element. It could be whatever. Maybe I'm just gonna draw on some stuff here. Okay, so pretend like that is some kind of bridge thing. All right. So I'm drawing it in the profile in my bridge base map. I'm not drawing it in my geometry file. Okay, so if I go back to my geometry file, I'm not going to see that, and I probably don't want to see that because maybe the roadway guys are going to reference that geometry file, and they don't want to see the bridge stuff. So, I don't, maybe there is cases here where I'm not going to be drawing in that geometry, but I'm going to draw on that profile just through a reference, like I'm doing here. Okay. So now let's say I'm ready to maybe create some kind of bridge sheet that shows this profile. So I'm going to jump over to a bridge sheet file that I already created just to save time. So I'm going to just browse. And I don't have a bridge folder set up, so I just went into the roadway. I just created one here. And again, this is just for demonstration purposes. I will check this in because I want to get that edit I just made. Okay, and so I just have a design model here, and I'm gonna attach some files here. So I'm gonna get my geometry file. So let's just grab them all. I don't really need them all, but let's just grab them all. I just skipped through that, save some time. And now I'm going to add a reference to my bridge base map, right? Okay, so I'm gonna come over here, I'm gonna open up my profile view. Okay, so you notice that you don't see what I drew in that reference, right? Because I was across a reference. So when I open my profile view, it's going to show me my profile from that file. Um, but if I have anything else attached that drew something in the profile view in that other file, like I just did with my bridge, so I can come here and I can hit attach all profile views. So when I do that, you now see that it attached those other profile views. So basically the references to this profile view. So it's pretty cool. Hopefully that made sense the way I explained it. But if you draw something on a profile reference, you can get that to show up on your other files. You just have to use that attach all profile views button. Okay, I got one more. I'm probably going to cut this one short just for interest of time, but it's about a cross-reference app. So while we're talking about creating sheets, I thought it'd be a good idea to show you guys our cross-reference application. Hopefully you guys have seen it or are familiar with it. We had a similar one in SS4, SS10. So it's up here in our Ohio DOT workflow under the apps tab. There's this OHDOT cross-refs. So it is a little different from V8i. Kind of gave you a little bit more functionality here. But basically, this is for managing and creating cross-references. So if you have something like a call out to go see another page, you can use this to help manage that, because a lot of times what happens is your page number changes, but we forget to come in here and make sure we update the page number listed for to see details, and then at plan file you realize that it says to go see the wrong page. So this app kind of helps alleviate that problem. So let me just throw text in here. So, and I'm in ProjectWise. I'm in a file Matt made earlier. So if I come in here and I just say, for details, see sheet, and I won't put the number in, right? So I'm gonna place that. It's just a plain old text element. So what this app will do is it'll actually create that link to a sheet number, and then you'll have the ability to update it. So what I'm going to do is in here, I'm going to just hit select text element. I'm going to go select the element I want to set up a new link to, and then you'll see this button right here. It says set up new link. So there's a more detailed video here, PDF doc on what all the buttons do, the standard about, all the apps that I write have the same help menu here. The results, all my newer apps are starting to have the results at the bottom. So literally everything that the app does goes here. If something goes wrong, this will be red. The line will be red to let you know something failed. But you can copy the results, you can clear the results. So let's just set up a new link here. So when you hit click set up new link, you get this dialog, and it's saying, okay, what file do you want to link to for me to go find that page number? So I'm gonna hit search. Since I'm in ProjectWise, it's gonna open up the ProjectWise dialog. If I'm not, then it's gonna open up just the regular Windows. So I gotta go to this project. And I'm just gonna choose a file at random. So I'm gonna go to my sheets. I should have a bunch of sheets here. And this happens sometimes. So I'm saying only list documents that are associated open as designer, but I think in our case they're actually linked to MicroStation. Yep. So if that happens to you guys, you switch this, or you can just go to all and not worry about it. So let's say I have. Let's just pick a sheet. I know I got a sheet here, so I'll just click on that GPO3. And so what it's going to do is it's actually going to search that file, and it says, okay, here's all the models I found. Which model do you want me to look at to try to find the sheet cell? So I'll select that model. I'll hit select, and then you get the property selector. So I wrote this to actually handle more than just sheet numbers. So if it finds a sheet cell, an ODOT sheet cell, it's going to populate with an instance. So if for some reason you have more than one sheet cell in their model, which we typically don't recommend, if for some reason it does find more than one cell, you'll see all the different instances that it found of a sheet cell. And when you click on that, it'll then show you the properties for that sheet cell. So in this model, in my file that I selected, it found one sheet cell, and then here's all the properties it found in their current values. So most likely you're just going to select sheet number, because that's the one you want, and you hit OK, and it'll fill out that you selected that property. So now you have enough information to actually create this link. You know, I'm asking for just the basics of what I need: what file, what model, and then what property. So I will hit OK. It's going to create that link, and then it says down here successfully added. So if it failed, it would be red, and then I can pop that out and I left my mute on. So I'm cutting it short just for interest of time. There's a video here on our wiki page that'll go through this in more detail, but this is one way to help manage those cross references. The last note I'd say is that this is static. It's not going to automatically update. You do have to come back in this app and update it. I even give you a key in if you want to do some kind of migration bulk update script batch process. You can do it through key in as well. Watch the videos, it'll give you more information. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Eric, where he's going to go over a quick cross-section demo and then go in more detail about annotations.
Thanks, JD. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And be sure to include system audio so I don't have a silent movie like we had earlier. There was a question in the chat, and I thought I'd touch on that before we got started. Question in the chat was the culvert location, maybe adding a name boundary. And then the follow-up on that was, is there any way to regenerate the sheets and keep your drawing models, basically? So two things here. In the name boundary tool, there's a civil cross section by 2 points, so I can come in and put 2 points wherever I want an additional cross section. If you're doing that, I just need to make sure I'm adding it to the group that's already there, so it'll be part of that group. Then so that's available. You can look at that. Then the second thing is, in this time, the software doesn't have any way to regenerate and keep your drawing models. That is a change request that we have with Bentley, and numerous other DOTs have that request with Bentley as well. So you're definitely going to want to identify those areas, lay out those boundaries before you start clipping cross-section sheets. So we'll leave it at that. And let me jump over here to PowerPoint. So I've got two different things to cover. The first is just talking a little bit about some cross-section sheet clipping. And so just like the process that Matt displayed, we're using a container file to attach our references, and you would just use the XS file for that and use a number 000, 100, 200, 300, etc. Use those numbers for your container files. And when it creates the files using JD's creation app, it's going to use the 2D design seed file. So we'll use the name boundaries process, and it says here boundaries are placed in a 3D model. Well, that's a little confusing when I say here use the 2D design seed. So in that design seed, as soon as I activate my terrain, it's going to make a 3D model in that file. I'm sorry, not in the design seed, but in the XS file. So as soon as I reference and activate my terrain, it'll make a 3D model in that file. So this is the 3D model that's in our container file that it's going to make for us. And it's going to place the boundaries in that model. And that's what I had here. Since I had this open, here's the original. That's showing design 3D. So actually this should be the, we go to multi-model views. So there's the original design model that was created. And then I attached my references and made my terrain active, which creates that 3D model. And then I've opened two views, and the name boundaries are placed in the 3D view in that file. Okay, so sorry if that's a little confusing on my PowerPoint. So the cross sections, themselves display a cut of the attached 3D models when I get into the sheets. So they're not elements that are drawn in that file. They're cut from the model. So if it's in the model, it's going to display in my cross-section sheets view. So that's kind of a little overview there. And another slide just overviewing this. So the sheet design file, Bentley added the one sheet per file option in 2020 release 1. Each sheet design has the drawing and sheet models. And there's a little thing there showing me the original container file has the attached references and name boundaries. The sheet file, both of these boxes are the same sheet file with drawing models and sheet models. So I liked Matt's graphics he had better than what I've got for this. So that's just an overview, and then I've got a video kind of going through a few things. So let's take a look at that. Let's talk about managing the levels for our cross sections. So we've covered the cross-section clipping process in videos before, and you can find those videos on the Bentley community and the OHDOT wiki page. And what I want to do is just pick up, I've already got a container file created. It stopped. So I have my xs100.dgn. And in my design model, I've attached all the references for everything that I would need to see on the cross sections, and I've laid out the name boundaries. So if I go to drawing production and pick this little icon in the lower right of the name boundaries area, it's going to open the name boundary manager. If I select my cross section group, I can use this icon to turn on the show create drawing dialog and this one to open the create drawing dialog. And what I wanted to mention in this dialog is the name that's used here. I'm going to do one sheet per design file, and it's going to go to the sheets folder for my under roadway sheets. So that's good. And we've suggested in the past maybe changing the name here to the PID number underscore XS101, or whatever range you're using here. I'm using the 100 range. This name is used for three different things. It's used for the saved views that are created. It's used for the drawing model name, and then it's also used for the sheet name. So what I've found that I like to do is just leave it at the station. So the saved views and drawing models are named by the station. It will name the design files by the first station that's in that file, but you can just go back and rename the design files using the proper PID number underscore XS and the 3-digit number. So I'm going to go ahead and clip my name boundaries here. I've got my drawing model scale set to 5, sheet model 1 to 1 in the sheet model, and then 1 to 5 in the detail scale. So I'll just hit OK and let that process, and then we'll rejoin the video. Okay, my sheet clipping process has completed, and I've opened one of the files, and I can see I made a mistake in my levels. I left this prismoidal volume level turned on, and it's on in every cross section in every sheet file. And to turn that off, what I'm going to do is go back to my container file, and in the 3D model in the container file, I'll turn that off there. And then that should carry through to all of my drawing models and all of my sheets. So let's go ahead and go open that file. So I'll hit the file button to go to the backstage, and I'll open my container file. And in this container file, I'm going to open the 3D model directly. So in the lower left view groups, I'm going to choose the design 3D views. And I can see the levels that are on here. So let's go ahead and make some change to some of these levels. I just want to get rid of these prismoidal volumes. Okay, so I'm going to use the Control E button to open the level display dialog. Now, the way this works is I don't want to change the view display. So view display is going to impact this view window only. What I want to do is change the global display. And global display is going to apply to all the different models, all the different views in this file. So with the global display option selected, I'm going to scroll down and find my KD file. That's where my prismoidal volumes are drawn. So I'll just turn off those two levels. And I can see that those are no longer displayed. I should have zoomed in before I did that. So here's those prismoidal volumes. So that's what I want to turn off using global display, and then I'll save settings. And let's go back to our cross-section sheet file. So in the sheet files now, I can see that prismoidal volume area is no longer drawn. Now there's one thing here that's been discussed a few times, and it's fully on display here, is the display of the ground line. This is a known bug. Based on zoom extents, it may appear dashed, it may appear solid, and the same thing is going to happen in the prints. So that's been reported to Bentley, and hopefully will be addressed in the next software release, or at least a future software release. So hopefully that helps with managing your cross-section levels. They're all managed globally with our current configuration from the container file. So that's all I really wanted to cover in relation to cross sections. Like I said, the process to clip, we've got videos for that on the wiki page, and then it's really getting into managing the levels that we've had some questions, and we want to make sure you understood that that's done from that container file, and using the global display is going to carry through all the sheets. So unless there's any questions that come across for that, I'm going to move on to some of the labeling and placing notes and things. So I want to take a look at just the place text and place notes commands, just the MicroStation commands, and using fields and text favorites with those commands. And then there's a place label command that we can use with also fields and text favorites. But in this case, the place label command is going to allow us to read civil attributes and civil content. So starting with just the MicroStation place text command, a field is going to point to a property of an object and read its value, and then we'll display that value. So I can access more than I have listed here. I can access element properties, file properties, model properties, and then various civil properties. And again, those civil properties are only really accessible using the place label command, not the place text command. The fields, once I've used those in a piece of text or text string, and if I make changes, those fields are automatically updated to reflect changes to the element or the file or the model. So I've got a couple examples of that I'll show you. Now, once I have a label that I've created using some fields, I may elect to save that as a text favorite. And so a text favorite is just those saved annotations. I can have multiple fields and just static text as well. Those are saved in the active design file, so you could reuse them at a later date. But you could also save them in a DGN library that could be used and added to the configuration. And I'll touch on that a little bit. I'm not going to show you how to do that. I think our preference is to manage that from a standard standpoint if it's something that would be used over and over. So let's go ahead, and I think I've got a video next. Let's take a look at using fields to insert some file properties. So I'm going to choose the place text command, and I happen to be in the Open Roads modeling workflow in the drawing tab, and I'll go ahead and choose place text. In the text editor window, I'm going to use the insert fields option, and I have several different types of fields I can choose from in the drop-down list. And in this video, we're just going to do some file properties. So I'll go ahead and choose file properties and hit OK. That's going to open up a dialog with all the different properties that I could insert into my text editor as a field. So let's say I want to insert the file name. So select that option. Then there's some parameters at the right, and then a preview of what's going to be inserted at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and leave the path set to false, but if I set that to true, it's going to show the full path. So we'll put that back to false. And I could change a few other options there. I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK and insert that into the text editor. So this is a single element now as a field that I cannot edit that text. If I want to make any edits to the field itself, I can right-click and choose the Edit Field option. And that's just going to come back and open the fields editor where I could make some changes and go ahead and OK those changes. Now in the text editor itself, I could put in a label or a prefix before that. So I'll say file name field, and maybe I want to put revised by, and let's take a look at our fields to see what we've got available. So I'll go back to insert fields under the file properties, OK that. And in general, I can see I have a last save by option. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that and OK that. So now these are two computed fields that will be updated if any changes are made to the file. So I'm going to go ahead and place the text in the file. And what would happen is if I exited the file, changed the file name, when I get back in, this field would update to reflect the current file name. Or if someone else edited the file, that field would reflect the name of the person who had last revised the file. So that's just a quick intro to fields and some examples using some file properties. So I don't know that we would use that specifically. We're doing title block information for our revision and that type of stuff. But I just thought I'd show you that example that it's available to get access to the file properties or model properties and put that kind of stuff in the file. So let's move forward. I've got another video here. Let's take a look at using fields to annotate the properties of an element. So I've got a couple lines, a couple cells in the file. So we'll use those for a couple different examples here. So we're going to go back to my place text command. And in place text command, I'm going to insert a field. I'm going to start with the lines. So my field type, I'm going to use element properties and hit OK. And then I need to choose an element. So I'll choose one of my lines. It really doesn't matter which one. And I'm going to annotate the length of this line. So I'll scroll down under geometry and choose length. And I can set the properties here for the format and then OK that. I'm going to put a prefix on there, length equals. And now I want to place this and have it read the element to get the value. So on my place text tool settings dialog, I have the last option toggled on. So this needs to be on and able to have the relative association between the element and that field. So in the bottom left, it's asking me to define the anchor point. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the beginning of my line and then just place that text in the file. And then I'll do the same thing with the second one. Choose the beginning of the line and place that text in the file. So now these are computed fields. So if I select one of my lines and change its length, now you'll see the field value will change to reflect the new length of that. So let's take a look at a couple of parameters that are available for cells. So I'll go back again to place text, insert a field using element properties, and I'll choose one of my cells. So the available properties are shown here. And I'm going to go ahead and use just the geometry point to get the origin values. And I'll go ahead and OK that. And I'm going to place this in the file again using the association lock here. And I'll choose my element. I want to make sure I get the origin. So I'll use the origin snap and just make sure I get the origin of that and annotate those coordinates. And I'll do the same thing with the origin of this one and put those coordinates in the file. Now, when I move this point, these values should update. And it also maintains the relative position relative to the element. So if I grab this barbecue grill and just move it over here, you'll see the values updated as well as the position of the text. Now I want to make one last distinction here in the place text dialog when I'm looking at my fields in the field types. There's also a placeholder type. And for the cell, what this is something that's defined as part of the cell definition in the cell library. So in our cell library, we could insert some text with the field for the northern and eastern coordinates. And then when I place that cell, it would just read the values of where it's placed and update that placeholder text. So that's how those are used. Those aren't used separately in the place text command. So that's a quick look at some of the element properties and annotating some element properties using fields. Okay, I've got one more video related to this. Fields can also be used with the place note command if I want to include a leader line with my label. So I'll go ahead and choose place note. And again, I'm going to insert a field using element properties. I'll just use our line for the example with our length parameter. Go ahead and OK that. So again, I want to make sure in my properties or my tool settings, I have the association lock turned on. So let's go ahead and place this relative to the line. So when I'm choosing this element, I do need to select or snap to the element so it will build that association. Notice if I just click on the element, sometimes it grabs it and sometimes it doesn't. But if I grab a key point, it's definitely going to do that. But if I just click on the element, see, it did not read its value, but if I use a snap and snap to the endpoint of the element, it's going to read that value. You can also use the midpoint snap or something like that, or if I just want to, I can use the nearest snap. So just make sure you're using a snap and you'll get consistent results. I found without using a snap, it did not always pick it up. At that time it did. So that's just a quick run through using the place note command to insert a field. So we can save these fields or any labels that you build as text favorites. So in the OHDOT standards, there's a DGN Lib with some that we've already set up. And when Matt was in his videos, I saw he was using some of those. You yourself, if you want to save your own user annotations, they are stored in the design file that you have open, and you could reuse them in that file. So if you've got any one-off annotations that you might be using and then need to come back and use that on another day, you could save those in your file. And again, if it's something that we need to save that's used all the time, that's something we want to add to our standards. In this video, we'll take a look at saving our label as a text favorite that can be reused within this design file. So I have the place text command selected with the text editor open, and I'm going to choose the insert favorite option. So that option is going to give me a drop-down list of previously defined text favorites, and these are all stored in the OHDOT standards. Now, all these labels are relative to OpenRoads geometry elements, profile elements, or cross-section elements. So currently, you're not going to find any labels in here that are just based off microstation elements. So what I want to do is make a label for my line length, save that in this file so I could reuse that later. So I'm going to come down and choose the Manage option. Now with the Manage option, I'm going to see my active file and then the library itself. So in the library, I've got all the labels that have been previously defined. So there's like alignment bearing label, there's the value. If I click on it, it's going to show me that it's reading an OpenRoads plan annotation field to get the line direction and its parameters. So these are not editable, they're read from the library, and you could insert that into your label and use that to annotate an OpenRoads element because it is annotating an OpenRoads plan field. But I just want to do a microstation line length label. So in my file, I can add a folder or favorite. I'm going to add a new favorite. I'm going to name this line length. And I'm going to go ahead over here and choose the field type I'm inserting. I'm inserting an element property. And we're going to choose the element type from the list. So it's a little different. I'm not going out and picking a graphic. When I do it this way, I'm choosing an element type from the list. So I'm going to annotate a line. And then I'm going to find the length, its total length under geometry. And I can set my parameters here, number of decimal places, and that type of thing. And I'll go ahead and accept that. So let's brought that in as a parameter that will be computed. And if I want to, again, I can put a prefix on that. Could have done that first. And once I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and save this label. So I'll hit the Save option, and we'll close the Text Favorite Manager. So to use that in my list of favorites, I'm going to insert a favorite, find my line length, and now that's in, and I can just go choose my element and place my label. Now again, that is stored in the local file, so it's not available to me in a different design file. If you want to share these labels so they're used in multiple files, they need to be created in a DGN library, and then that DGN library added to the configuration. So that could be done on a work set configuration basis. It could be on a district, the local folder standard basis, or if it's something that applies to all users, that's something that we could add to the OHDOT standards. So that's just a quick look at using the text favorites to save a label with a computed value from a field. So let's take a look at the place label tool, and this is the one that's going to be used to read the civil attributes or the ORD attributes. So again, these can be placed as text favorites or cells, which is something we haven't seen yet in the videos today. And again, users can create these in their own file to access the civil properties, or you can just look at what we have defined in the library. Let's take a look at creating a label that's going to be used to read some civil attributes. So what I want to do is just build a label that's going to annotate stations and offsets. And I'll use these two light poles to annotate in relation to this center line. So we're going to use the place label command to do that. So I want to make note that the place note command and place text command, those cannot be used to place any text favorites that read civil data. Those are just microstation commands. They don't know how to read the civil attributes. Place label commands, the one we need to use to read the civil attributes. But I still need to use the place text command and the text favorites manager to build my text favorite. So what I'm illustrating here is that you guys can create your own text favorites that read a civil attribute, and that is stored in your local file, and then you can reuse it within this file. And then if you have something that you'd like to see added to the standards, of course, let Cadd mapping know so we can get it in the standard so it's available for everyone. So what I want to start is just my active file. I'm going to add a text favorite, and I'm just going to name this example 1. And we're going to build a station and offset label. So I'll type in STA equals as my prefix, and then offset equals as my prefix for the offset. And let's go ahead and get the text favorites that we need for this. So I'm going to pick my field type, and it's going to be an Open Roads Plan annotation field. And also note that there's profile, cross-section, and linear 3D options as well. Now, we're not going to go through all these, but I just want to make sure you guys are aware that those are available. So if you are in a profile context and want to annotate something, you can look at the available tools there for things that could be annotated in the profile. So I'm going to stick with the plan annotation fields. And again, there's several different types of elements here that can be annotated. What we're going to do is a point label. And I'm going to start with the point station. So I'll pick that option. And this is all defaulting to the settings of my active settings. And I can see the preview there. That looks good. So I'm just going to go ahead and accept that. And it's brought in at my insertion point. So I'll move my insertion point down here for the offset. We're going to do an Open Roads Plan annotation field for a point. And this one's just going to be our point offset. And I do want to make a couple changes on this one. So by default, it's going to show a negative sign if it's on the left. I could have it show always, which would be a plus sign if it's on the right. I'm going to tell it never show a sign. And what I want you to do is, if it's on the positive side, we're going to use a suffix of space RT. If it's on the negative side, we're going to use a suffix of space LT. I'm going to change my accuracy to 2 decimal places. And I'm going to leave the rest of these as they're defined. So there's my preview. That looks good. I'll accept that. And I'm going to go ahead and save this as example 1. So to place this, I need to use the Place Label tool. So I'll choose that tool. And there's 2 options at the top. One for a label with a leader, one without a leader line. I'm going to place this with a leader line. We've got an option here to place a cell or a text favorite. We'll come back to cell. Let me go ahead and place a text favorite. I'm going to use that example 1 that I just created. Now, since I'm doing this with a leader line, the dimension style is used to define the parameters for the leader line. And in OHDOT standards, we added 2 different labeling leader line options, one with a terminating arrowhead, one without. So those 2 dimension styles are not intended to be used for anything else when you're placing dimensions. These were added only for the purpose of defining how these leader lines are going to look when using the Place Label tool. So I'll use the option with no arrowhead terminator. When I'm placing the label, I can have it located horizontally, vertically, or in line with my leader line. I can have it start at the terminator or the placement point. I'm going to start at the terminator and then emanate out to where I want to place the text. And my horizontal attachment can be automatically defined by the software, left or right. I can set it to one of those values. And I have the 3 options on the bottom turned on to use annotation scale to associate it to the element. So if the element moves, it will update the values and also associate its relative association, which means the position would also move in relation to the element moving. Okay, so I'm ready to place my label. And since I'm doing a station offset, it needs to know which alignment is used for our station references. So it doesn't really prompt you very well for that, but the bottom left, it just say place label, identify element or data point. So I'm identify the element, I'm picking my center line. Now it says select point location. So I'm going to pick my point location on my light pole and accept that. And there's the station and offset. And I'll do the same thing on the other light pole and place it over here. So you can see those labels that are defined and how they're coming in format-wise and everything. Now I'm limited to the format that can be defined in the place text box. So I can build labels with multiple computed parameters, multiple lines, but I can't do fancy things like place a box around it or a line separating them. If I want to do that type of things, that's where the cells come in. Cell is just enables me to add additional graphics to this, is really all it does. So if I change it to cell and look at the list of cells that are available in the dropdown, what the software does is reads every cell and every cell library that's in the configuration. So right now it doesn't filter those to the things that are labels. So what we've done is we've named them with the underscore LBL prefix, then PLN for plan, and there's some other in there for profile and cross section. So I'm going to do a plan label for station and offset. So if I scroll down, I can see there's station full, no prefix, blah, blah, blah. So here's a station offset with no prefix. So let's take a look at that one and see what it looks like. Again, I can choose my leader line and set the other parameters. So it's still knows this center line is my reference element. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick that same point and place this label in the file. And I'll use this one and place this label in the file. So I can see my values are the same. That's good. And this just doesn't have any prefixes. So this cell is just defined with a line down the middle that it's using. And the length of that line is defined by the cell itself. If this text were longer, it's going to outrun the length of that line. So that's one of the limitations of that. So we've got a lot of different cell labels that have been defined in the OHDOT standards. And if there's more that we need to, there we go. If there's more that we need to add to this, just please let us know and we can get those in there so they're available for everyone. You guys can set up cells as a district if you have some things that are just unique that you don't think apply to everyone. And we can help you get that configured and get that set up. So that's the run through of just using some labels that compute some civil attributes and placing those using the place label tool. So there's obviously a lot more available than what I went through there, you know, getting into profiles and cross sections and all the different labels. So what I wanted to do was just kind of introduce you guys to building labels, whether they're just simple microstation based things or reading civil attributes. And I was doing those labels in the drawing model itself. So I should have mentioned that in the videos. Even in the ones up here with a white background, I just happened to have a white background set. I was still in a drawing model. I wasn't in a sheet model when I was doing those because that place label tool won't function in a sheet model. It'll function in a design or a drawing model, either one. So that's really all I have. And I can turn this back over to JD unless there's any questions.
Yeah, so let's open up to questions. You guys can chat like in the chat conversation window, or you guys can unmute yourselves and talk. I did mute everyone at the beginning. We don't have the ability to unmute. That's Microsoft doesn't allow that. So if you want to talk, just unmute yourself. So I don't think we have any questions that we missed, did we? Oh, here's one. So question, why can we not place labels in sheet model? So the place label tool, when you're in OpenRoads Designer, Bentley won't allow that to be used. So like if you try to use the place label command in a sheet model, ORD will tell you it can't be used and won't activate it. So it's not something that we're doing. It's just something the software can't handle. So you can see when you try, it just won't let you.
It probably has to do with the reference files being rotated and scaled as well. They're not true world coordinates in the sheet model as it would be in the design or drawing model.
Now the stuff with the text favorites that Eric showed in the beginning, you know, that still works in the sheet model. It's just when you go to the civil properties and the place label tool is where you lose that ability. Okay, so I know we went a little long today, a little bit longer than normal. Oh, no, does the cross-reference VBA work in drawing or sheet? So the cross-reference, it's actually a C# add-in instead of VBA, but that doesn't really matter. Yes, it'll work in any model. And when you hit update file, it'll search all models in that file too. So yeah, and I really just did a brief demo. That the video does go into more details of the inner workings of it. We're just running out of time there. I feel like nobody ever wants to talk. They always text it in. But okay, so I say if you guys have any more questions, feel free to contact us, reach out to us. Give us a couple days to get this video up on our wiki page. We'll also post a combined PowerPoint. PowerPoints will contain each of the videos individually too. So give us a couple days for that, and you'll see it go up there. And then also, if you guys have any things that any ideas or topics that you want for the next webinar, since it is open topic one, please email those into us as well. So with that, I'll end the meeting or webinar. I'll see you guys next month.